are. In a very busy news cycle, we are going to try to focus today on an area that maybe doesn't get as much attention as it really should in the discussion of immigration. And I'm going to introduce myself quickly. I'm going to have Roxana introduce herself, and then she and I are going to have a conversation about some of these issues, and then hopefully open it up to you for some questions at the end. So we plan on talking for 30 to 35 minutes, and then we'll open this up for some questions. But my name is Kristen Dayley. I'm speaking to you from the Seattle area. I'm an attorney, but I'm also the executive director of a group called Their Story is Our Story. Some of you follow us, and what our role and mission is to tell firsthand stories to humanize the situations with migration, immigration, and refugees in particular. Roxana, would you like to introduce the Florence Project?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roxana Avila-Cimpeanu. I'm the Deputy Director at the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project. I'm talking to you from dry heat Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm so happy to be here and thank you for joining us. The Florence Project is a nonprofit legal service and social services provider in Arizona, and we are as old as Taylor Swift. We started in 1989, and we serve detained immigrant adults and children, as well as some previously detained immigrant adults and children. We're the only ones to do that on a large scale in the whole state of Arizona. And we continue to provide that legal and social services support and upholding due process.
Thank you. So for those on this call, Roxana and I have been talking since the beginning of this year about this webinar and the things that we wanted to focus in on. And so just so you know, I'm a huge fan of the Florence Project and the essential work that they do. Roxana, you work specifically with minors. And I wanted just to start out by asking you to describe a little bit what it's like when you first meet a child who's in immigration detention.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen. Yes, I started at the Florence Project in 2016. I was a staff attorney on the children's program, and so I had direct representation of clients. And so one of the things that we do in addition to direct representation is know your rights presentations and legal intakes for every single child who enters the detention system in the state of Arizona. And we do that within 10 days. And so, thinking back on my time when I used to do regular KYRs and intakes of kids, you walk in and each shelter is different. Some of them are inner community and can seem more like a boarding school. Others are in deep, dark basements of old hospital buildings. Some of them are tiny little buildings in the middle of our communities. And so the physical space can be very different, but what you feel is just sort of the dissonance of you just walked in from the outside and you're walking in and now there are children, there are fences, they're often very curious to see you and excited to talk to somebody who's not from the shelter facility. And oftentimes we're the first people they've met in the United States who have actually said, welcome to the United States. And I'm so happy to see you. I'm so happy to talk to you. And the first people who actually want to help them. And I think, one of the things that we track is Border Patrol abuse of children. And so they may face things like lack of food or being held in cold cells or being verbally or physically abused by Border Patrol. And so sometimes we're the first people who are there just to help them.
So you mentioned KYR, which is Know Your Rights for people who don't know the lingo. But, one of the things that occurs to me immediately with approximately a quarter of the children who are in custody are under the age of 12, how do you describe, legal concepts to, say, a 6-year-old?
Yeah, it can be very challenging. I think it's hard to explain these legal contexts to an adult who has grown up in the US and speaks English. It's one of the most complicated legal systems that we have in this country. I've heard it say that we're the most complicated, except for tax law. So they still have us beat. The Florence Project, we are so proud to work with a team of seasoned and experienced social workers, and they really help us develop programs and techniques for how to work with young children. Even, we work with children ranging from 6 months to 17 years old. And so each child is going to come with different experiences and are going to be at a different developmental stage. And so we have, a presentation for older children. And then when it comes to tender age children, which we consider under 5 years old, we do different things. We talk more in visuals. We have little dolls that we show them to represent different people in the immigration court process, or this doll. Which doll do you think is you? Which doll do you think is your parent? Okay, now where do you think this doll is? And really talk to them at their level, and focus on tailoring the things that we need to say in a way that matches where they're at in their developmental history. And I think that is such an important question, because I don't think that is a question that's asked in immigration court or immigration process for children. The system is not designed for children. And you can even see how it trickles into the way children are treated in this process. In 2016, a judge who's in charge of training other judges said in a sworn statement that he could teach immigration law to 3 and 4-year-olds. And that's flabbergasting to me. I have a 4-year-old right now, and she is learning her letters and her numbers and how to brush her teeth. And so to me, the idea of teaching a 4-year-old these complex immigration concepts and their rights, and without having someone to accompany them and explain this to them, or speak for them when they don't understand the concepts, that's flabbergasting. But I think it shows that how the system is designed, and it is not to protect children.
Yeah, that's stunning to me. I had practiced law for almost 20 years when I started representing asylum seekers. And there's no question that immigration law was the most complex body of law I have worked with. I truly believe that most of our leaders and certainly our journalists do not understand immigration laws and most immigration concepts, let alone the general populace. So it's incredibly difficult. And I would say, yeah, tax law may have you beat on some things, but tax law isn't changing every day. And so that is certainly a challenge with immigration law. So tell me, we have these these unaccompanied minors. What are some examples of things that would cause a child to enter the country alone or be navigating the legal system alone?
Yeah, that is such a complex question. And of course, we see children from all over the world. And so depending on individual children or the area of the world they're coming from, or geopolitical updates, it could be different. And so we're seeing children coming here. I think the largest threat is because something has gone terribly wrong. It's really hard to imagine that a young child would end up unaccompanied in a foreign country unless something has gone terribly wrong. And so some of the reasons that we see are, facing abuse at home, or forced labor, or trafficking, or they're being trafficked to come here, or there's political instability. It could be extreme poverty. And a lot of times, more recently, we're seeing a lot of climate change refuge. And so, volcanic explosions or floods or hurricanes that make where they are not a safe place for them to be. And some of them are coming to reunite with their loved ones and their family members who can take care of them. Some of them, want to study, or a combination of many things. I think at the end of the day, no child makes a decision on their own to end up alone unless something has gone horribly wrong.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about some of the physical circumstances that you find your clients in, but walk me through a typical day for an unaccompanied minor in the immigration system. What does the world look like to them?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times in this world, these facilities are called shelters. And I think that really softens what this are. These are detention facilities for children. The children do not have freedom of movement. They are watched at all times. I think sometimes you can really see it. Sometimes we have our clients come, to appointments or the office, and they wait for the door to be open for them because they're not allowed to touch doorknobs. They're not allowed to touch each other. We've had situations where we've had siblings who are detained together and they're not allowed to hug each other. They go to school primarily on the property. They eat lunch on the property. They only have certain times when they can have recreation, and things are really restricted. They have to ask permission to do everything. And sometimes they may be the only child who speaks their language in the entire facility, or they may be the only child who practices their religion. And I think, these facilities are not designed for long-term care. They're really designed to, in an ideal world, post a kid in safety so that they can be reunited with a loved one. But that is not what we're seeing. We're seeing children languishing in these facilities. And, on top of all the other trauma that has happened, this is another traumatizing thing that happens to children.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the languishing. I know there are federal laws that are supposed to limit the amount of time that a child can be held in detention, and the administration is challenging that. But are you seeing that have any effect right now, or are we just ignoring those limits?
I think that, that's an area that we see pendulums. So there are laws, but how the Office of Refugee Resettlement, who is in charge of these children, interprets those laws or enacts those laws can be stricter depending on the administration. Right now, what we're seeing is some of the strictest rules that we've ever seen before with regard to reunification and who children can go live with. And so right now we're seeing things like DNA tests being required for people who are proven family members. And we're seeing, household members have to go through that process. And those people may be undocumented, so they may not want to submit that information. I remember during the last Trump administration, I had a client who was reunified with his uncle, and they were doing everything that they were supposed to do. They went to an ICE check-in, and ICE detained his uncle. And so not only are they making it culturally, structurally challenging for somebody to even want to give their information, but they are adding more and more layers to that process and more requirements. So we are seeing children under 2 who have been separated from their families for months and months, which is unusual for us.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think we were going to talk about later is that ICE has launched this unprecedented effort to target minor children who've crossed the border. They've begun sharing sponsor information with ICE. All these tests that you're talking about, we're seeing reports this week that they're actually targeting minors who have been placed into foster or sponsor families and bringing them back into detention. But all these policies, just as you mentioned, critics have been saying they're going to discourage families from claiming their children because it's going to put all of them at risk. What message do you, I mean, maybe it's obvious, but what message do these policies send about how we value these children's lives and their rights?
Yeah, I think these policies speak volumes about how we prioritize children's lives and rights and how we view children who are not from this country. I would arguably say some children who are from this country are also not being treated the way they should be treated. But instead of looking at the system and enacting policies that would truly protect immigrant children, the administration is actually making it nearly impossible for, as you mentioned, safe, responsible parents and sponsors to reunify with their children or to sponsor family members and to provide a loving environment and culturally competent care in a way that allows that child to actually go through this complex process in a stable and safe way. These policies are putting children at risk rather than saving them. And the prolonged detention that we just talked about is only increasing the mental health distress that many of these children face. And so I think that there is a very clear dehumanization of, quote, other people's children that is happening that I don't believe in my heart aligns with the values of our country and what we want to see. And these are being done in the name of safety, under the guise of safety, but it's also being done in our names as citizens of this country. And I think the question I always have when I see another attack on children and another very targeted, directed attack on children is I don't see how putting children in danger benefits us as a society or benefits us as citizens. And so that's really hard to grapple with.
Yeah, I think back to the Trump 1.0, if you will, and when the family separations happened, it was actually having people report and show pictures of those family separations that helped to change the public sentiment. I don't think we're seeing that, those visuals the same way. Certainly, we are seeing the polls show some public sentiment changing as, schools and other areas are hospitals and courthouses become areas for raiding. But I want to do a little bit of a pivot to what is going on, what the Florence Project is doing and offering, and how that can impact a child who's been put in detention. So, first off, you're unique in Arizona, I believe, as the only organization providing free legal services to detained children. Can you talk to me a little bit about just the scale of the need that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, we're the only ones who go to the shelters and who serve detained children pro bono. And we built expertise over decades of working with this population and developing child-friendly practices alongside our amazing social workers. And so I think that, in our experience, there are so many attacks against immigrant children right now. As you mentioned, being targeted for enforcement. And so children who have already gone through this process, have already been vetted, have already been released by the United States government to caring sponsors are being redetained. Again, the prolonged detention of children, the dismantling of advocates and protections, getting rid of attorneys, getting rid of the Office of Refugee Settlement Ombudsman Office. And really, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but during the last year of the Biden administration, the administration actually filed a lawsuit against one of the shelter providers for years and years of pervasive sexual abuse and abuse of minors. And so as an organization who work with some of those children who have repeatedly seen over the years the abuse of children being perpetrated by the people who are supposed to take care of them, we were glad to see that we were on a road to accountability. But that's one of the first things this administration did was drop that lawsuit. And so to me, that's very clear. Getting rid of attorneys, one of the biggest roles we play is, yes, direct representation and mentoring on cases and teaching children their rights. But a critical role we play is to be the eyes and ears on the ground in these facilities. We visit the children regularly and do check-ins. We monitor to make sure that they're on track for reunification. We monitor to make sure that their religious needs are being met, that they're actually able to talk to their families, that they're receiving the food that is required. We've advocated for things like eyeglasses and medical treatment and, being allowed to continue breastfeeding a child as is a right. The shelter found that inconvenient. And so we advocated for this child to be able to have the right to continue breastfeeding her baby. And so a lot of the role that we play is being the eyes and ears on the ground, and by taking away attorneys and engaging in these continued funding cuts, we find ourselves in a position where not only is it hard for us to do this work without funding, but it's also hard for us to take on new cases because we don't know if this funding is going to be cut tomorrow. And so that makes it challenging. A lot of the cases we have, we are currently representing take 6 years by the time they get to a green card, just because, again, the system is so convoluted and complex. And so I think that what we're seeing right now is more directed and targeted attacks against immigrant children and those who are on their side than ever before.
Yeah, and sadly, now a green card isn't even the safety piece that it was before,
Or citizenship, even.
right, which is stunning. But so for people who are not familiar with immigration law, unlike in criminal court, there is no right to an attorney. And I believe in the numbers were in 2023 about just over 55% of unaccompanied minors had legal counsel. There are some, if people haven't seen them, there are some stunning reenactments online of what it's like to have a 2 or 3-year-old in front of a judge in an immigration court. And you have children, you can imagine yourself what that might look like. But yeah, what, in your view, and from what you see, what are the consequences when children are forced to face court proceedings on their own?
Yeah, this is a really tough one for us to think through as people who have spent decades, building a program that works with children and meets them where they're at. I think overall, what we believe is that kids should be kids. They should not be lawyers. And we are seeing the consequences of having children lose access to attorneys. Without access to an attorney, kids, no matter if they're 6 months old or 17 years old, will be forced to navigate these complex immigration proceedings. They're going to have to face a judge who potentially, likely, used to be a former government attorney. They're going to have to face a seasoned immigration attorney who is trying to remove them. And there will be no one on their side. And I think that, a friend of mine describes being a lawyer as being a magician, because you have to say the magic words, and a lot of them are in Latin. But the point being that immigration law is particularly an area of law where you have to say things in the right way, or you don't qualify for the form of relief. And so I think I haven't done this study, but this would be a great study to do. People, and we see this often in, especially on our adult team, that when somebody doesn't have an attorney, they could lose their case, and then an attorney could step in and review the case, and they could win their case because we know the magic words. And there is no way to expect a child to understand those magic words. One of the things I saw around the time that funding was being cut was an immigration judge actually doing a mass court hearing for all the children in that room and asking them all at the same time, is Spanish your best language? Did you receive this document? And these questions seem innocuous, but they could have real consequence when it comes to the immigration case. Whereas if attorneys had been assigned to the case, we would have objected and said, this is mass hearings for something that means life or death are inappropriate and not child friendly. And so I think that's just an example of how this could go even deeper into the territory of adultifying children in a system that is not built for them.
Right. Well, and mass hearings in a situation where immigration law is so context and personal specific that, it just doesn't even make sense. When a child is successfully deported, where do they go? Where are they sent?
Yeah, so that's something that's also in this crazy world that we're living in. I have an answer, but it could not be true. So where they should be going is back to their home country, repatriated by the government through safety protocols, which means accompanied all the way to a place, for example, the consulate there. where somebody can pick them up. We haven't seen this directly with our clients, but we have heard reports from our sister organizations that sometimes children are being sent to countries where they're not even from. That's something that's happening, I think more commonly on the adult side. But that is something that we're keeping an eye on, and we're, concerned about what that would mean for a child.
Yeah. So one thing we've talked a lot about is in February, the current administration issued a stop work order that basically shut down legal services for, unaccompanied minors. That stop work order was stopped itself, and work went back on. But then in March, the federal funding for these programs ended. And this was a long-standing program, kind of in partnership with the Department of Justice. Everybody agreed it was in everybody's best interest that children, who are vulnerable should be represented. What has that meant for the Florence Project and approximately 26,000 children who were receiving services through these programs throughout the United States?
Yeah, I think this, we expected attacks. I don't think we expected the depth of attacks against children in particular. So this has been devastating for us and for our partners. I would take us back to a time before this protection was put in place, because actually, attorneys for immigrant children came about because children were coming in and being held in juvenile detention facilities for an indefinite amount of time with no advocates there to protect them. So there was a settlement for that that gave children protection, and part of that was to acknowledge that children deserve to be counseled by competent, independent advocates. And so we've gone through this history of not having attorneys, and we found that it was not in our best interest, based on the values of our country, and not in the best interest of children to go through a process in a system whereby there are no attorneys there to support them. We are so proud to join several of our sister organizations in filing a lawsuit that challenged the termination of this funding, because there was a stop work order, and then there was a full termination. So right now we're in the middle of that litigation challenging the termination. It's ongoing. It could be months before it's resolved, and the government seems to show no signs of backing down from wanting to terminate this program. And so that's been really challenging. And what that has meant, for us on a practical level is, as I mentioned before, we've had to pause on taking on new cases because we can't ethically enter on cases that can take years to resolve with this level of uncertainty about what that funding can look like tomorrow. But we are dedicated and committed to standing by each and every child who we are already representing, which is over 700 children. And we are ensuring that they don't have to go to court alone. And we are continuing to be the eyes and ears on the ground in the shelter and meeting with every child and providing legal services while they're in detention. And this includes prepping them from court, ensuring that they're being treated with dignity and respect, helping them reunify with parents and loved ones, and making sure that they are safe and cared for, and that we are flagging any injustices that are happening.
So I think you've answered this in part, but in a system that seems designed to work against vulnerable children, what keeps you going? How do you maintain hope?
Yeah. So I think for me, I was a child immigrant. I came to the United States from Honduras when I was 6 years old. And for me, this was before a lot of really bad immigration laws were enacted. And it was really easy for me. My dad, got a scholarship, and he fell in love and got married, and he brought me here, and, I was able to get an education and, end up in law school and become a lawyer. But I think for me, what this really highlights is that one of the biggest privileges that we have in life is the luck and circumstance into which we were born. And I think a lot about our clients and my own family members and how they just didn't have that luck and circumstance that I did. But for that, their lives would be totally different. And so I think what keeps me going is this idea, I don't know, a little bit of karmic balance, I think, of knowing that I got a lot of good good luck coming my way and I want to give back, but also just because these children need us to be there, to be the people. We're the only ones in this system who are there just for them. I was having discussions with some of our children's program this week, and we were talking about how we are extensions of the child. we are attorneys who talk to them and get to know them and represent what they want in their lives. And one of the privileges of the work that we have is that we're able to, meet them where they are as children and to help them get on a path where they can continue that growth and they can continue dreaming and developing and figuring out what they want to be when they grow up, and making mistakes like we do, and learning new things and getting excited. And so I think that that really keeps me going. I've represented over I think 150 children during my time at the Florence Project, and every single one of them has been so special to me. And the thing that I think about the most when having these types of conversations is, if you could just meet the kids that I know, you would see that they are children, they are kids, just like any other child, and they deserve our respect, and they deserve our protection, and they deserve to be kids. And that I'm fueled by righteousness. I keep going because I know that is the right thing to do.
Yeah. As I've been listening to you, I keep thinking about a story that involves adults, but during the family separation, one of the executive directors for an organization that I work with here in Seattle, they found out that a bunch of mothers had been detained in an area in one of the federal prisons, and nobody had been told, but they found out, and they got permission to go in and meet with them and do a know your rights. And they said it was really depressing in many ways, because as they get these questions and they'd be like, yeah, you probably don't qualify. No, you're probably going to be deported. No, this is, I felt like every bit of news that they gave was disappointing. And at the very end, they were getting ready to leave. And one woman raised her hand and they thought, oh, one more thing. And she said, no, 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 no. She said, I want to thank you. She said, you are the first people that have come in to give us any information, to care about us. And the whole room, he said, stood up and applauded. And he was in tears, and I'm in tears thinking about that. But in so many cases, you are the first bit of humanity that these children get to see. So before we kind of go into questions, can I just ask you to share maybe a success story that illustrates why this work matters so much?
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I really I resonate with that too. I think we feel the gratitude from our clients too, all the time. And I think I always tell my clients, I'm telling you this information not to scare you, but to prepare you. And I think sometimes having the information, um, as scary as may be, is better than not knowing anything. And so I really resonate with that. Yeah, I have so many success stories. Our staff are amazing, our teams are amazing, and really work hard. So I can share one that actually I don't know, it still sticks with me. And I think it's because I don't know, after I have had children, I think my brain flipped or something. I just have like such a sensitive spot. But I remember working with a young mother, and we worked with her, and she had her little baby in the shelter. She was 2 years old at the time, and we worked together really hard. And it was during the pandemic, I remember too, because when she turned 18, one of the big things that we do is children who are aging out of the shelters are at risk of going to adult detention because they can no longer be 18. They could no longer be in the children's shelters once they turn 18. So they're at risk of going to adult detention facilities, which are like maximum security prisons. And so we're always concerned, and especially when we work with clients who have little children, about what that means for if they're going to get separated, and what's going to happen to the little child, and the additional trauma of that. So we work hard to identify somebody that children can go live with, and ask guys to release them on their own recognizance instead of detaining them in adult detention facility. And so I remember the day that she turned 18 and we got the news that they were going to release her. and I went to ICE and we were all masked up. And her baby had a little doll with her that she called by her own name. Let's say the baby's name was Christina. She called the doll Christina because she thought that's what babies are called. So I don't know, that just really is so sweet. And the way that this young mother interacted with her child, I think just really has stuck with me. And then, about a year later, she sent pictures and the baby was like a toddler, like running around crazy, just happy. And my client was going to school and she was living with a family member and taken care of. And we had filed for relief. And just I think that really highlights, to your other question, like how do we keep going, is the role that we play is a critical point, juncture, a slice in our clients' lives, but the consequences of what we do are so important and impactful. And so I think about her often and just wondering, like, what is she studying? Like, that baby's got to be, oh my gosh, is that baby in kindergarten? Like, I literally just have this thought, is that baby in kindergarten now? And just really hoping that they're continue to be safe and happy and growing.
Yeah, that resonates with me. Even last night I was checking in on a number of my asylum clients because I know how terrified they are right now. And I think about how large my family has grown because of this work and the number of people that I care about. Before we end this conversation, can you just talk really briefly about how individuals can support the Florence Project's work and what resources you need most urgently?
Yeah, and this is a hard question because there's so much going on. And I really, understand, and I feel it myself sometimes, just feeling frozen because there's so much going on and you don't know what to give attention to. And you're like, okay, I got to focus on my lane and do my lane good, and other people will do their lanes good. So it's really hard. But I think, what we need most urgently is, if people feel called to and are able, is donation so that we can have more stability and be able to continue our work despite these funding cuts. I think another one that is, I'm going to say it can be annoying, but doable, is calling your reps and senators and asking them to stand up for immigrants, especially unaccompanied children. If you follow us on Instagram and other socials, we often do call scripts when big things come up so that you can know exactly what to say. One of our social workers calls this being a Karen for good, which means we are talking to the managers all the time and asking people to change things. And that actually is very meaningful. They have to count those calls. And then the last thing, which is something that everyone here is already doing, and I'm so appreciative of, is learning more and talking about this in communities. I think, Kristen, you mentioned earlier that, for some reason, and family separations are still happening. And now they're happening in the interior of families who are living here in our communities. It seems nebulous, but it's so important to highlight what is actually happening and to highlight critical things, especially during a time when we see so much political theater and distractions. We need our communities to be able to understand how the government is treating immigrants, including children, and how they're doing this in our names. And so learning more, I think, is a critical first step, and sharing more is something that will continue to bring light to what's really happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you, the Florence Project provides scripts for immigration issues. If you don't have the app, 5Calls app is really easy and just has a button you can push to call your representatives and your senators. And for anybody who thinks, oh, my senators are already on board, or my reps, they're doing the right thing. Just so you know, 75 Democratic representatives this week gave a commendation to the good job that ICE is doing, I think 2 days ago. So my rep was one of those. So, so don't take it for granted that they are on, representing the things you would want them to be representing for you. If there's any questions, please put them in the chat. I can, you can try to raise your hand. We'll try calling you that way, but the chat's the easiest way. I did get asked if there's going to be a recording. We are going to make a recording available. We're also going to do a write-up of this conversation for those, who maybe it's the too long didn't listen, We'll make sure that there's a couple of different ways to share the information that's been discussed today. Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for being here. Roxana, is there anything else that you would want to share that I didn't ask about or cover?
I mean, I could talk forever. This is I don't know if you've heard the term ikigai. My therapist introduced me to this, which is like where your skills and passions converge with purpose and meaning. And this job is that for me. And so I feel like I could talk about it forever. But I think, yeah, I just want to acknowledge how hard it is to stay up to date, because it's a bummer. It's a bummer out there to stay up to date. But I think that, at a time when we're people are trying to silence us, and people are trying to remove eyes and ears, being vocal and engaged are amazing things to do, but also taking care of ourselves and each other.
Yeah, I will say I have found that the greatest antidote to hopelessness and discouragement is to act, to find a way to get involved and to serve. We do have one question here. What advice would you give to organization social workers who continue to provide post-release services to unaccompanied youth and their families? That's a big one right now.
That's a great question, Erika. And I think it's hard because I think historically we're like, okay, they're released, they're with their families, they have their case going, like they can find safety and stability, and that has been completely upended. And so I think it's really hard. And the advice I would give to social workers is, one, keep doing the amazing work that you're doing, because children and immigrants are not just their cases either. They're also full people with full people needs. And a lot of times it can be really hard to focus on, complex immigration matters when you have other needs that need to be met first. And so that's one of our philosophies here. And I think that work is so important. I would also say, if you don't have attorneys in your organization who can do Know Your Rights presentation, I think Know Your Rights is one of the most important things that we have right now, is for people to actually understand that, because we are living in a time when not all the laws are being honored and respected through these processes. And so I know that at Florence Project, we're working actually on putting a video out. And I think they're doing the fancy editing right now. And so it should be out on our website soon, but it's a Know Your Rights presentation specifically for released unaccompanied children and what it means for them. And, what to do if they come to your house, and what to do if you're stopped on the street, and what rights do you have? And so I would say either, conduct one or coordinate one, or, check out our website. Yes, I can share it with Kristen too once we have it ready. By the way, our staff are like Olivier level actors. They're doing some skits. It's like, I love it so much. But yeah, Know Your Rights is one of the most critical things that people can have right now. And I love seeing videos of people using Know Your Rights, and like it works. And
no, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and even I think that if you give Know Your Rights and if you use Know Your Rights techniques and you assert your rights and you still detain, that's still something. You're still asserting that, and that can still be used for a defense. And so I think that's critical.
Getting asked if they'll be translated into subtitles.
Yes. So right now we're going to do it in English and Spanish. But yeah, I think we'll look into different languages as well. if anybody, I know you have a group of language of language skills here.
We
That would
do
be
have people who would
helpful.
be willing to help. Yes. So
That could be helpful. Maybe a script. But yes, I think we're starting with Spanish and English, but I would love to be able to
yeah. Now
have
that would be wonderful. There's lots of write-ups of Know Your Rights, but yeah, I think a video would be very helpful. I look forward to that.
yes. And then you guys see your question, when will these be released? So we filmed it and we're working on the editing and hope to get it published on our website soon.
Right. Okay. We'll watch for that. And yes, definitely let us know. All right. Anything else? I think we are at time. I am so grateful for people taking a part of their Thursday to be here. And Roxana, I'm so thankful to you for taking the time. Thanks for your engagement and the amazing work that you're doing. Really, truly, on behalf of the least of these. I'm always amazed in an administration that talks about wanting to protect children from human trafficking and other harms, that we are where we are. So thank you for actually doing the work.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate you so much and your dedication to bringing to light, the experiences of the clients that we work with and people who go through this process. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and learning more and sharing the information. It means a lot, and it also can feel very isolating sometimes to work in the desert in detention facilities. And so to have almost 50 people on this call hearing our stories is very fueling. So thank you so much for being here, and take care of yourselves.
Okay. All right. We will let you know when we have the materials from this if you want to share it further. We encourage you to do so. Thanks so much.
All right.